So the light is something that is new to me in terms of what I've recently found out. So the species grow in deciduous forests. So what does that tell you? Well, anything that is deciduous loses its leaves. And just a little aside, these are very often said to be deciduous over on the internet there. And as we know, the internet is never wrong. As far as I'm aware, deciduous means that once the leaves drop, they return. And in this case, well, they don't, do they? The leaves drop from these pseudobulbs, these canes, they don't return. I suppose we could say it's semantics. You could say, well, they're returning in a new pseudobulb, a new cane down there. So I don't know, anybody who's into semantics might be able to tell me whether that is the definition of deciduous. As far as I'm aware, it means the leaves return like on a seasonal basis. So whether they could be called a deciduous or not, I don't know. But just suffice it to know that the leaves do drop naturally from the older canes. And as you can see from these, they're at various stages of leaf drop there. Okay, so as far as temperatures go, so these are one of those that have such a wide range of temperatures that they can cope with. They do like it to go cooler in winter. I believe they can drop down to 5 degrees Celsius. Now, I keep mine at 12 degrees Celsius, so maybe that's something that isn't really doing them that good. If they don't get that really cool period over the winter months, then maybe they're not as likely to bloom as much. So for me, unless I move it somewhere that's cooler than that, I can't do anything about that. So that's one of the things. Well, that's two of the things, isn't it? So we've said the pot already. I don't think the pot is really optimal for that root growth. I don't think that, again, it's getting enough air, enough ventilation to those roots. And the other thing is, I believe the temperatures really should go a little bit lower. So here's the new thing for me as far as my culture for Dendrobium nobilis goes. These live in deciduous forests, so that means that those leaves fall off those trees during the winter months. So when is that plant getting the most light? Well, if it's an epiphytic one, it's likely to be getting most light during the winter months rather than the summer months. And in fact, Kew Gardens themselves bears that out. They say that this plant should get higher light in winter than it does in summer, and therein lies my issue, and probably the issue with lots of people who live in a temperate climate. How do you provide more light in winter when it's naturally shorter days, naturally lower sun in the sky? Unless you're providing grow lights, it's impossible to do. I've got grow lights, but it's nowhere near the intensity of light from the sun. So maybe in future I should try and move it a little bit closer to those grow lights. And I think this year, in fact I know this year I had it in a slightly shady spot. So that may be my problem. And of course the converse is true, that when it comes round to summer, then you may find that it's better to move it to a slightly shady spot, because naturally those leaves will be out on the trees and it would get more shaded. So that's the new thing I'm bringing to the table in terms of my care. It might be new to you, I don't know. Give me a thumbs up if it is. Give me a thumbs up anyway. Why not? Who wouldn't? Okay, so for me, I believe a combination of those factors that I've just talked about of what's caused mine to have fewer blooms and smaller canes this year. So what can I do about it? Well, I've already mentioned I can move my Dendrobium nobile to a better position during the winter, and I'm going to move it to a slightly shaded position during the summer. I'm going to change the media. Now, as far as media goes, I'll tell you what Kew Gardens uses, and they are in a temperate climate like me. So they use 3 parts orchid bark, 2 parts pumice stone, and 1 part charcoal. Now, I don't have any pumice stone, but I do have coconut husk, and I do have some charcoal. It's not as big a chunks of charcoal as I would like, but I'm going to experiment with that. I've had some success so far with other orchids that I've grown in coconut husk, and you may remember a video, I mean it still doesn't look that brilliant, this Borregia Nelliila, but you can see the new growths on it. As soon as I've brought it somewhere warm, as soon as I've put it in coconut husk, it seems to be doing much better than it was doing in the bark. But again, that's very much down to my own environment. So we're going to get into that pot, have a look and do a repot and see if we can see one of the other problems that might be the cause of it making fewer blooms than it did in previous years. So what we're going to have a look at is what's going on in this pot, and hopefully you'll be able to see it. If not, I'll have to zoom in. So, usual label with all the information on. That says no ID. Last repot 15th of the 2nd 2020. So it's possible that it could have rotted down a little bit, but I suspect really I've just not put it in enough of a free draining media for my environment. So let's have a look. Hope you can see this, because I'm not going to do it again. I've got my coconut husk at the ready over here. And I've even got a nice pot with lots and lots of holes in at the ready. Okay, so I'm kind of going to come in at the side here, and hopefully I can show it without getting in the way. So, well, there's definitely roots. There are definitely roots there. You can see the new roots forming, which is fabulous. You can also see that it is quite fine. I'm looking here. I mean, I have no idea what was going through my head when I did this. I mean, there's vermiculite in it. I mean, it's certainly not free draining, is it? That's quite a fine mix. It's done well. Oh, there's another little growth down there. It's done well to actually survive that. So Kew Gardens pot theirs up in very, very tight pots. They say that Dendrobium Nobile species prefer to be in like really tightly pot bound pots. Well, I've provided that. It has been pot bound, but whether there's enough ventilation getting to it, I'm not really sure. There's moss in here, that's for sure. You can see some dead roots. I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to get some charcoal out, and I'm going to, I mean, I wish I had some pumice stone. I might have to have a look at getting that. I think the fact that they grow in rocky limestone outcrops as well is quite telling, because possibly limestone would be something that they would help them. Maybe it's the calcium in that they like. I've not talked about feed. I always avoid talking about feed, because even though it might be important, I honestly don't think it's as important as getting the other things right. I think the fertiliser is just like the icing on the cake, so I don't really get involved in that much. I use something called rain mix, and it seems to work perfectly well without having to get any more specific than that. Occasionally I might give it a little bit of extra calcium, but I can't really say. I mean, it's one of those things, isn't it? You don't know what would happen if you didn't give it, and you don't know what would happen if you do, because you're not doing a scientific test. So I don't think those roots are too bad, but I do think that it would be worth me testing out at least. You can see we've got some new roots, but they're kind of down the side. There's certainly a lot of dead ones that I want to try and get rid of. So I might speed this little bit up, and then we'll show you the potting up. Okay, so that's what we've got. Most of these new roots are coming down the side, which maybe tells you that the media that was in the middle wasn't really the best, because otherwise you'd have thought they'd have been heading for that middle section. It was just too congested, and I think no matter what orchid it is, I think it benefits from removing those dead roots occasionally, just to give it a little bit more space to push the new ones out. So we've got plenty of new roots there, some new growth there. We've got a new growth coming there, one in the middle, another one there, new root starting there. Okay, so let's get that into a pot. Okay, so I've got my mix here. So we've got coconut husk, and we've got some charcoal mixed into that. I say it's only fine charcoal. I did read actually somebody making a comment this morning on one of my other videos on coconut husk and coir, and they did say that the brand Canna, C-A-N-N-A, Canna is a good one to get, because I mean a lot of them say that they don't have any salts in and that they wash it out, but then when you go and buy it and test it, it's still quite high in salt. But apparently that particular brand, according to this person anyway, that particular brand doesn't have any salts in it, so it's worth having a look into that. I might try that next time, and it'll save all that pesky washing of the coconut husk and the coir and so on. So got my media there, I've got my pot ready with the holes in it, and it's just a case of potting it up. Okay, so why coconut husk in particular? Well, through experience and through talking to people in comments, probably more experience than anything else, but I've found that over time in my environment, even bark rots down pretty quickly, and anything that I add to it just makes matters worse. It seems to me anyway that my environment is just prone to holding on to moisture. I mean, it stands to reason really, doesn't it? We don't get much sun in this country. We don't get a lot of low humidity days, even though we're in a particular low humidity period at the moment. But in general, you know, 99% of the year it's very high humidity. It's usually overcast, which means that these plants in here don't get that sun through the window. So they are prone to remain wet, which isn't something that the majority of orchids like. And through talking to various people in comment, coconut husk seems to have that kind of characteristic, which means that it holds onto water for quite a long time. But maybe it's because of the way it holds onto the water, maybe it's because of the shape, the different size shapes of the different chopped bits of husk. It could be that it has, or it allows more in between the media, which hopefully will mean that those roots don't get absolutely waterlogged and they've got some room to breathe, some room to get some ventilation into those roots. So that's a theory anyway, so we'll see what happens with that. It seems to be working well with the others I've tried it with. I've tried it with the Borragera, which I mentioned earlier. I've also tried it with my Oncidium twinkles, and that seems to be working pretty well. I've tried it with a Miltoniopsis, so we'll see what happens with that. So I think it's time for the Dendrobium Nobile to get the coconut husk treatment, and let's see how it goes. So I hope I've not just added to all the other Dendrobium Nobile repots on the internet. I hope I've added something slightly different. And even if you don't live in an environment like me, maybe there's something in there that you found useful. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. And I'm going to stick a couple of videos up on the screen for you to have a look at next if you're into dendrobiums. And for now, I'll see you on the next one. Bye.